All right, welcome back everyone to Red Spotlight. I'm Alexis and I'm joined by David Francisco for our Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. reaction commentary series. Of course, for the longtime S.H.I.E.L.D. fan who just wants to come back here and talk about the show all day long. We love this show so much. And we're already in the midst of the, oh my gosh, we're already halfway through the first half of season 2, if you can believe that. Last week we delved into episode 5, and today we are going to react to episode 6, and that is A Fractured House. This was written by Rafe Judkins and Lauren LaFranc, and it was directed by Ron Underwood. This was broadcast on October 28th, 2014, to 4.44 million viewers. And this has a couple of guest appearances. Of course, BJ Britt as Antoine Triplet. I would like to say, just to make it clear, because I have to say, I imagine Silva Surfer is like a bit angry. And honestly, this irks at me too. Historically speaking, guest appearances in an episode are not, I think, what most people would commonly associate them to be. I think when you ask an ordinary person who's watched a lot of TV, oh, a guest appearance, they're there for like an episode. And even if they're a reoccurring guest, maybe 2 episodes or 3 episodes, but if you end up being like a reoccurring character that's kind of there for all the time, but you're not treated like a main star, it's weird because, like, you know, all a main character is like you're there all the time. But then this other person who next to you is there as well, but you're not. And officially, you got to be clear here. In TV terms, it all depends on your name, and it all depends on how where they're going to go with you regarding this project. We know BJ Britt, going into this season, they were well aware of the fact that he was not going to be available to be on the show for any longer than, I believe, the first 10 episodes. So a decision was made. Well, sacrificial lamb. And on top of all of that, because they had all these other characters, they made the choice to not really flesh out the character beyond the likable personality that he is, for this show's, situation here. But considering the fact that Antoine Triplet here has, Trip has been through a lot already in these last couple of episodes, it does feel wrong to put him in the category of guest appearances. And especially when you have Nick Blood, who kind of leapfrogged him and secured main star status. It happens a lot of the times with any other TV show. This may not be the best example. But I remember many, many years ago, do you recall the sequel series to The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody?
Yeah.
The Sweet Life on Deck? Okay. There was a reoccurring cast member that was there from the very first episode. The character's name was Woody. I don't believe he was ever really treated like a main character. Well, he was a main character, but he was never in like the opening credits until the very end of the show, like the third season or whatever it was. But then in season 2, they brought in some other person, and then they included him in the opening song intro. And I'm like, you just leapfrogged. Who are you? And this other person who's been around since the very beginning is not getting the same kind of like status. And it's a weird feeling. And I wonder, there's always, we talk about in all kinds of industries, across institutions, obviously, that there's just this disconnect between the people who run things at the top and those of us who consume things at the bottom. By the way, for those of you who are listening, if you catch me or David yawn, please understand, this is just what we are now. And we're tired, and it's not indicative of like, oh, one of us is bored or the other. We're just tired and sleepy. I don't know what it is. Like, next week's Thanksgiving. I'm feeling tired and sleepy like the whole time. Like, I was on my feet all day long today, more than I usually am. So I'm just wanted to put that out there. And as to what I was saying, people talk about what happened with this election, or what happened or when we talk about the studios and the executives not getting at all what people really want, from a populist standpoint. I think this is one of those things as well, where it's like, the people at top, they think of it as one thing, and then the rest of us who consume it, and we're like, wait, what? That doesn't seem to make any sense. So I wanted to clarify that, because this is like the sixth week in a row where I'm reading a list of guest appearances, and the first one is BJ Britt, but it doesn't feel right to call BJ Britt a guest star when he's really a part of the ensemble. So, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna make an executive decision. I'm going to rewrite history. I'm going to remove BJ Britt's name from this list, and I'm going to put it onto the main cast list, because I feel it breaks my heart. This is just too much. Here's what I'm going to do. Forget the guest appearances. I'm going to go off with the main cast. Clark Gregg as Phil Coulson, Ming-Na Wen as Melinda May, Brett Dalton as Grant Ward, Chloe Bennett as Skye, at this point, Agent Skye, Ian DeCastricker as Agent Fitz, Elizabeth Henstridge as Agent Simmons, BJ Britt as Antoine Triplett, and Nick Blood as Lance Hunter. I hope that makes somebody out there listening happy, because that, you see how I said it out loud? That felt more right than the other way around. And then the other characters still are moving up there. They're not quite main yet, but they're, for instance, we have Henry Simmons returning as Alfonso Mac McKenzie, Adrienne Palicki as Bobby Morse, Adrian Pasdar as Glenn Talbot, and then we have Tim DeKay as Christian Ward, followed by Falk Henschel as Marcus Scarlatti, Brian T. as Toshiro Mori, Brian Holt as Sebastian Derrick, Melanie Cruz as Noelle Walters, I should say maybe Noelle Walters, and Michael Enright as Julian Beckers. So there, we got we got the gist of it down, basically. Here's some interesting information that I found here about the writing. Brett Dalton, in response to being asked about Ward basically being sacrificed so S.H.I.E.L.D. could be saved, said, "I think he knows how this game works. He breaks down Senator Ward's whole plan, and Coulson makes his deal that wraps up right around the midterms. Yada, yada, yada." I should say, David, how much of this episode do you recall?
Not much.
Okay. Just wanted to make that clear before we begin. And, of course, before we start, comments for episode... Which one? 4?
Yeah, 4.
Okay, let's go ahead and get to those.
So, right here. First one's from Gary Marshall. It says, Kevin Tancharoen did indeed direct the most episode, 16 according to IMDb, just ahead of Jesse Bochco, Billy Gerhardt, Vincent Misiano, and Gary A. Brown, who all directed over 10 episodes each. Kevin isn't the only family member to be involved in the series, as their father, Tommy, was the transport coordinator over the whole run of the show. Next one's from Silva Sofa.
How dare they hire their family and friends?
Yeah.
God damn.
Hello, my fellow agents. Hope all is well. I am the one of the few that really enjoy the Real S.H.I.E.L.D. arc, as it's the most realistic aspect of how government and intelligence agencies really work. Just as Yes Man from Season 1 gets hate from those who deny mythology and nature, the Real S.H.I.E.L.D. gets hate from those who deny how a government bureaucracy really works. Just my opinion, of course. Now let's get to that awesome and hot May versus May fight.
I gotta say, that might be one of the hottest moments of the whole show. I'm not sure, I guess, in the whole arc of this series, how many moments can be defined as hot. I know probably some people will be thinking of Daisy in season 4. There's a opening shot that people remember of her barely wearing anything. But no, I'm just describing what happened. You take it one way or the other. But definitely May versus May. Again, retroactively going back to that episode, knowing that Felinda happened later on, to see Coulson's reaction. I can't believe what I'm watching right now. May and May going at it, like the things that he must have been thinking. Just hilarious there, but yeah. And then as far as the overall comment in regards to the Real S.H.I.E.L.D. arc, I have to say, I don't necessarily have mixed feelings about it per se. I really liked the idea and the execution of Real Shield. Definitely in the moment. Um, Part of I think what makes this commentary series interesting is that we're reliving this show and revisiting it a long time after it happened. So there's definitely the potential for things to age differently. I feel like every time I've rewatched it, I don't necessarily I think feel differently about it, but I do understand. I think the perspectives of those who were not too crazy about it. Um, I just feel the Real Shield arc ultimately comes down to how you feel about Phil Coulson's arc in this season. Do you feel Phil Coulson was making mistakes? Or are you one of those trust in Phil? You see, I was kind of an interesting combination. I always trust Phil Coulson no matter
Mm-hmm.
what. And yet I still enjoyed the Real Shield arc and then also the perspectives of some of the people, not all of the people, because some of the people on that damn board were fucking idiots.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, seriously, it's like they come in to power and immediately they start to like hunt down their own agents. Um, and ultimately, what made them look really dumb was the conspiracy ended up being that uh, it was just a damn helicarrier. Then Nick Fury was like, "Hey Phil, can you take care of this for me so we can use it in a cameo for Age of Ultron?"
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess to some people it would say it went nowhere. Um, you could also say the whole point of it was to remind Phil that he really should be making this his own as he was, and not necessarily the way that uh he felt he needed to, because I think that going into season 2 and what we're watching right here, part of the reason for why Sky has felt isolated up until recently, because we just watched the episode where she was like, okay, from now on, all cards on the table, you have to show me what's going on with this alien writing and everything else. Bring me in on everything. And it was new for her because in season 1, Phil was like, well, there wasn't any of those issues. Everybody was on the same page. There really weren't any secrets. Now that Coulson came into S.H.I.E.L.D., a lot of that's changed. And you have to wonder, well, the impression I always got, and you tell me if you feel differently, is that Phil felt the need to be a little bit like Fury. Not completely. You know, he mentioned that there were changes that he made. Like he got rid of levels
Mm-hmm.
because he felt like it was not working anymore. I think also a big deal with this season is the whole idea of the Shield index list and where that goes with the with Inhumans, and the fact that they had to index one of their own, Sky, when she gets her Inhuman powers. Like, I don't know. It just feels like at the end of the day, maybe it wasn't all neat and tidy for, you know, people to, you know, process it, because I definitely do feel like of all the people to do a coup against, Coulson. Um, and then there were some people who had issues with May later on in the season. But I don't really put too much on May, because here's the thing. As somebody who can become quite paranoid, May was kind of left alone with these Real Shield people. And when you're surrounded by people like that, they're going to get their ideas in your head, and it's going to be really easy to misrepresent something. Also, at the same time, why did Coulson lie to May about anything? So I think that's also a lesson that he needed to make himself. It's like, yeah, he's the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., but just because you're the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. does not mean you need to be exactly like Nick Fury. You need to be your own director, which is why when we get into season 3, it's not like that at all. There's a wonderful combination. Really, not really at all. I think like the team in season 3 kind of goes back to how it was in season 1. They're much more on the same page than they were because of everything that happens in season 2. So I wouldn't necessarily argue that it was all for nothing. And I think we're gonna find out for ourselves. But yeah.
Last one's from Serenity Forever. Because this is obviously my go-to in terms of comments on these videos. At this point, you shouldn't be, but maybe you are. Maybe you still don't understand how deep the history is with most people involved in AOS. Surprise, but Drew got his start on Whedon's Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Even he wrote an episode of Firefly. There's a reason he is here.
Good for him.
Until the end, and why he's such a brilliant writer. So yeah, with Kevin and Drew combining their powers as writer and director, even with this being Kevin's directorial debut, you get something spectacular like Face My Enemy.
Yeah, for sure. I love the information and continue to drop that when you feel it's necessary. We love that.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Well, without any further ado.
Previously on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
I should have mentioned, I actually do remember the tension between Fitz and Simmons in this episode. So there's that. That was always a standout.
I'll take you to him.
A lot happens this episode, by the way.
We thought S.H.I.E.L.D. was protecting us, but in truth, they took advantage of our good faith. And they still are.
This is the introduction of the Splinter Bomb, a pretty cool effect. One of the coolest Hydra weapons. I mean, look at that.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to talk about briefly here because I think this is important to be said. What General Talbot was talking about there. Obviously, his point of view as a military man for the U.S. feels the need that basically every country should be on for their own and getting their own weaponry, their own bases. I mean, let's not be coy about what he was talking about there. S.H.I.E.L.D. exists for a very important reason, because it was a unified entity that would protect humanity from, yes, even their own leadership of all these different nations. Lest I remind anybody out there that we live in a world with various different world powers who at any moment can destroy each other at the flip of a switch. There's a reason for why a unified S.H.I.E.L.D. existed in the first place, because you know who also was the creator of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
I don't know how you do it. Going down there, talking to him.
Sacrifices we make for valuable intel, right?
Yeah.
Gemma Simmons undercover at Hydra.
The president of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who, if you can remember back in the movie Oppenheimer, is what was Roosevelt's vision for the world post-World War II. What was Oppenheimer bitching to Truman about in the movie Oppenheimer? And everybody else. It's like, you know, every time Oppenheimer was defending, okay, well, the Russians have this or the Russians have that, and supposedly our allies, and everybody around him was like a stooge for, you know, American patriotism, and saying, well, Truman is the president now. Let's do what Truman wants to do. But Delano Roosevelt was saying many, many times about a world organization should be where everyone is working alongside each other, despite the flags and the stripes and everything else. So what S.H.I.E.L.D., I think was interesting spiritually here, what S.H.I.E.L.D. has represented in the comics and in these movies is kind of exactly what Franklin Delano Roosevelt had wanted.
Sir, this wasn't us, was it?
No, this is Hydra looking for revenge. Best guess, Daniel Whitehall had his people impersonate S.H.I.E.L.D. to put the world's attention back on us.
So much for staying in the shadows.
Somebody bring this from home?
And by the way, his connection to S.H.I.E.L.D. Gets even further cemented, I guess, when in the final season, we actually do see Director Coulson, Agent Coulson, maybe the best S.H.I.E.L.D. agent there ever was, meet him in the past in the 1930s. I realized this is a side thing, but I saw those connections there, and I just wanted to talk about that in case that had not been brought up here. By the way, this whole sequence that we've been seeing one after the other, I mean, it's too much to say about what's going on, but I love the fact that we open with Ward and we see how he's being watched by Simmons, and Simmons and Skye get a chance to kind of like catch up for the first time. We haven't seen too many moments between those two since she came back, so it was nice to see that. And then also just talk about how the fact that it's so weird to have Ward there in the first place. And then on top, this whole sequence of Coulson walking in and everybody asking him, this wasn't us, was it? You know? So one after the other. And I think this is the first true episode where we get the full team dynamic for what this season is going to be. We have Bobby and Simmons here.
Coulson, quick question.
No, this wasn't us.
Oh, that, great.
And there we get, there it is. No, this wasn't us. Coulson having to respond to Lance right there. And then, of course, here we have Hunter. David, I'm sorry if I threw so much at you. I was trying to catch up with where this was going, but I that's just a connection that I wanted to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Whitehall's on the attack. And instead of using his own forces to destroy S.H.I.E.L.D., he's having the rest of the world do it for him.
Which is rather ingenious of Whitehall. You know, it's like, why would I bother taking out S.H.I.E.L.D. when I can just have the U.S. government do it for me?
You're lucky to be alive, General.
My lucky day.
It was my understanding that you had S.H.I.E.L.D. under control.
By the way, the casting is brilliant. Speaking of Oppenheimer, this actor who played Christian Ward was in Oppenheimer. He was one of the senators in the confirmation hearing for Louis Strauss, the character played by Robert Downey Jr. In the film. So if you go back to the panel, he's being questioned by these panel. He was one of them, interestingly enough. But I'm saying this was great casting. That they look at his face, like, and then he acts like every smug Republican senator you would ever know. Self-righteous. He even has the look. He has the death glare, and of course, the hypocrisy.
What I should have done months ago. Put S.H.I.E.L.D. in the ground for good.
He doesn't give a shit about anything. He just wants to win his re-election. So let's just go ahead and destroy the last good guys out there so I can get myself re-elected.
What I plan to do is lay out a proposal for a multinational police force that will target those suspected of ties with S.H.I.E.L.D. using any and all means necessary.
By the way, did you see the banner there at the bottom? I didn't even know for sure. I remember if they had cast him as a Republican, they literally put an R next to his name, Christian Ward. So what did I tell you? It's like right there. I can't even begin to tell you how many times there's been an awkward silence scene in a Quinjet.
You ever been married? Still talk to him?
God damn.
Those moments are always great, where she just says
Right?
nothing, but says like 100 things.
Yes.
We probably need to first look at
The shock sensor.
No, the
Voice
the-
actuator?
No, Gemma, can you?
I'm sorry.
I know, just you said you needed my help.
No,
so,
I do, yeah. Of course I do.
It's the micro this thing, the here.
Oh, yeah, I see.
This whole episode, the last three scenes have just been uncomfortable exchanges after the other. We went from Bobby and Hunter to Fitzsimmons and now Ward and Sky.
Don't you remember what happened at the well, what he made me do? He gets joy from one thing, hurting people.
Do you hear the fear in his voice?
What's this really about?
I need information about your brother. People, connections.
Is this about your father?
Him talking about his brother, saying that he's always got an angle or something like that. But then the second he has something over Sky, like that fear just goes away and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You got it.
That's why I like option one.
On the other hand, I know Toshiro. The best way to get him to leak intel is to get him bragging. I think it's worth the risk.
She can handle it. Deception's her forte.
The funny thing is, like, he meant that as a compliment, but considering all the things he's been saying about her lately, it's like,
You can go in, but if anything's off, we're coming after you.
Those were weird edits, by the way. It's like there was 2 cuts towards May, and I'm like, why not go to Bobby, she was
Oh,
talking.
really?
Yeah.
I didn't notice that part. Okay.
Yeah, it was weird. It was like I know it's the first one. It's just like I don't. Yeah, it was Bobby talking, but the camera was towards May. I'm like, she's not reacting much.
She speaks Japanese.
She has this annoying knack of picking things up very quickly.
You need to tell me, David, if you get the impression, but like he puts up a front, but I think here, at least for me anyway, I realized.
Still like option 2?
No, he still very much is in love with her. Even in the way that he said, she has this annoying little knack of like picking things up pretty quickly. But look at his eyes when he says that. Like he loves her still, and there clearly is some
Making targets feel special, that's her thing. You know, when I gave her my nan's pearl earrings, she was like...
You know I don't like you, right?
Dang.
I mean, May is very direct,
and
she's made it very clear she doesn't care for people who would talk her to death.
You can thank me later.
Thank you? What the hell were you thinking?
What was I thinking? I just saved your life.
You don't think I knew that guy was behind me? This is just you peacocking.
He made you, and he was going to kill you. And, sweetheart, nobody uses the word peacocking.
That was good.
And because what? Because you think I'm useless?
Of course I don't. That's not why I left.
Well, then why?
Fitz. I'm sorry. I can't do this. Excuse me.
Simmons has yet to make herself very clear here. And so up until this point, I think our sympathies are naturally with Fitz because he's right. You know, from this point, why would she leave her best friend like that when he needs her the most? And you could say perhaps his recovery maybe was elongated because she left. But I think ultimately he knows she asked to leave. Like he sees through that whole veneer. So her revealing that has yet to been revealed. Also, this whole thing that Coulson just did, that's why we love him.
Go on record defending S.H.I.E.L.D., condemning Hydra. The American people are looking for a simple enemy, Mr. Coulson. It's what makes them feel safe.
And Hydra isn't the obvious one. Like, I get S.H.I.E.L.D. fucked up and all that, but Hydra is still out there.
I would be inclined to agree with you, David, and yet when you look at the results of something that happened in the world pretty recently, you might think to yourself, well, I mean, word is correct. Like, people want a simple villain. And I feel, ultimately speaking, again, I don't want to extrapolate this to things that don't involve S.H.I.E.L.D., but if you look at just historically, people feel safe when leaders point to something as being the problem, and all we have to do is get rid of them to make the rest of us feel better. Historically, that's what works.
Did you have to do anything?
No. We believe there are other ways to get information from people.
I don't agree with him for using those tactics, to be clear about that. But this is why weasels like him and grifters like him are so successful in this world. Because people allow themselves to be manipulated by our worst tendencies. They don't want to interact with anything involving complex thought. They want it to be simple, even if it's a lie, if it makes them feel good.
I know
let's
what you
do
did.
it.
How you forced him to torture your youngest brother. I know what happened at the well.
So it's a well now.
He's lying here, by the way. I don't know if you could tell. This is what he does.
You can't trust him. He'll smile, bare his soul. It is all manipulation. He is a master at it.
Aren't you?
I know, right? That's the problem with this. It's like, okay, if you say he's a liar, but you're the total
really a liar. I mean, and a murderer.
It's like, who do we believe? We're just both evil people?
He told our parents I forced him to do it. I've spent too much of my life trying to unravel his lies.
That part he's saying might be true. Again, who's to say?
Yeah.
Can we tell? No. I mean, there has to be a reason. But then also later on, he admits that he was jealous of Grant. Or no, he was jealous of the younger brother, Thomas, because he was not quote unquote tortured the same way that he was. So it's like, I don't know, like this family's fucked. I mean, what?
It's not going to be simple. But I think I know a way we can both have what we want.
Your father killed people.
But also,
yes,
David, just to be clear with you, it's like right now the American public is not clear the difference between SHIELD and Hydra. And you know what? I'm sorry, but I'm going to retroactively... Hey, Steve Rogers, maybe this one's on you. I know that Black Widow was like saying like, I think like the wreckage in the Potomac is like, the Potomac River is like a pretty loud statement. It actually wasn't. Maybe you should have said a statement and made it pretty clear the difference between SHIELD and Hydra. But I think to him, he was so pissed off that he was betrayed by SHIELD that to him, SHIELD and Hydra were the same. At least big SHIELD was. But smaller SHIELD were a lot of real people like Phil Coulson's team that could make a difference. And so when you leave a vacuum like that open, well, the U.S. government was like, well, what's the difference? SHIELD, Hydra? You guys screwed everything up. And there it is. So the average person, they're not going to know the difference between SHIELD or Hydra.
Please, Lord.
no. But we can find him. Together. I promise you.
It's really gross thinking he thinks he has the edge here.
A man brave enough to have his own brother executed for his crimes? Well, Christian will milk that for all it's worth. And the trial should wrap up right before the midterms.
Your brother saw the same angles. Maybe you two are more alike than you think.
I don't know. Personally speaking, seeing someone use a family member's downfall to win an election, and this just may be who I am, that's just kind of gross and evil. No matter what crime the person committed, it's like, I don't know, it's pretty clear what you're using this for. I think this is the first episode that you're really getting the sense how much of a powerhouse Bobby can be too. And then of course May is
all alone.
I love how no matter what you throw at May, she's never fazed by it. Even in how Agent 33 2 episodes ago was like, I'm gonna use knives, and she's like, whatever.
Yeah.
But from what I've seen, the only thing that makes him worse is you.
I know. Why do you think I left?
And there it is. Something we haven't previously been exposed to before. Simmons left not because she wanted to leave Fitz, but because she saw that her being around wasn't helping. So despite the fact that it may have caused her immense pain, I think she asked to leave because she saw that her presence wasn't helping him get any better. I think Fitz is in a coma for days, if I'm not mistaken.
Just don't die out there, all right?
And there is the first time we hear "Don't die out there," one of their famous catchphrases. That was her saying, "Please stay." Just to be clear about that.
Yeah.
Time to go.
Bye. Although, in hindsight, I feel like if you're going to transfer a high caliber murderer like him, you probably would want to sedate him. You know? Freeze him in carbonate.
Yeah.
Do not give him 1 inch.
So at this point, the transfer is complete. SHIELD hands it off to the U.S. military. And I wonder how good of a job the U.S. military is going to do at keeping him contained.
And while S.H.I.E.L.D. is gone,
This is pretty fucking
Hydra is a
disturbing.
problem
Like, just
that the
gross.
world
What he's able to
must
do
still
here, like...
face. Otherwise, that darkness will grow and spread. Cast a shadow over us all.
What did you think was going to happen? What did you think was going to happen?
Rest probably hasn't healed yet. You sure you don't want to wait a few days? The pain helps me remember.
I would have been like, never mind. Let's just do this at the time.
Okay.
Cool tease.
Yes, let's go ahead and go to Amwan.
What the fuck, dude? Okay, I believe his brother at this point. With those lingering final shots, I don't know, dude. I'm so back and forth on it. Because, like, god damn it, dude. If it's all been a lie, it just makes you wonder what hasn't been, other than the things we've been able to corroborate ourselves. Anyway, Jesus, the Ward stuff. There's so much to read and so much that can't be read. His brother could just be that good at hiding his darkness. You know, that could be the whole thing. Because Ward genuinely does seem like he fears him. Again, he's really good at selling his act. Lying is what he's good at. Obviously, I mean, he betrayed everybody. He's been an Hydra agent for God knows how long. You know, so like it's not outside of his wheelhouse to spin a narrative that sounds believable. But something still kind of feels off. And it might just be because I've known Ward longer that I even want to give him any kind of extension at all with how things have been playing out. It just feels like for me at this point in the story that we wouldn't be getting the truth right now. What we're seeing, what we're witnessing is a means to an end. It's just a piece of the puzzle. So like only because this is happening the way it's happening and he's being turned over, his ability to get out of it failed. His brother's story, his brother's narrative won out. Him sacrificing, exercising his evil from himself and his family, taking responsibility and ownership of that and the truth itself feels like in and of itself as a play. The whole thing mildly feels orchestrated. That said, this was such a fun episode, you know, and honestly, respect to Talbot on two fronts. One, you know, obviously that bit at the end where he's like, how many people did you lose? It sucks to lose a good soldier. That whole like empathy and sympathy that he had in that moment for what they were going through, as well as his integrity and his honesty about his position, because we know he doesn't like Coulson, we know he doesn't like S.H.I.E.L.D., but he's not going to lie. So when those people came in and attacked that UN presentation disguised as S.H.I.E.L.D., he knew that wasn't S.H.I.E.L.D., and he didn't hide that. He was like, you know, they looked like S.H.I.E.L.D., but I don't think that was S.H.I.E.L.D. Hell, he could have used that and weaponized it to gain further support for what he's been doing this entire time, but he didn't because that would be foul. So I gotta give him so much credit for both of those situations in this episode. Great stuff. I like that we continued and focused on, especially after the reveal last episode, the relationship between Hunter and Bobby and kind of the leftover unresolved issues that they kind of have, especially about their reservations about working together, or at least his, because he doesn't really see where he fits in to this whole thing. Doesn't really know if he should be here, if he wants to be here, what his role is, but he also still pines for her attention and all this other stuff. There's a lot of unresolved stuff going on between those two, and every scene with those two kind of bickering or bantering or working through their issues. It was a lot of fun seeing them fight together, the way they kind of act very similar. You know, it's hilarious when you kind of bump into these things where these two people are going on these missions, they're playing other people, being undercover, they're doing pretty much the same thing, but it gets under one or the other skin. It's a very complicated situation and relationship, I would imagine, to even be in. Especially with him being a mercenary and her actually being, you know, associated with S.H.I.E.L.D. the entire time. But now he's part of the team. She vouched for him. She trusts him. You know, he saved her life multiple times this day. And then, you know, back at the base, Fitz is still struggling. She still sees him as she knew him, and he can tell that she's looking at him that way. Not really knowing how to connect to him in a way that she used to, because that's not really who he is anymore. But with Mac, somebody who doesn't know who he was before, he just sees him for who he is currently. And while, yes, he does kind of bump into some issues here and there, he's not looking at him as anything other than who he currently is. He's not projecting outwardly this frustration or this look. He sees that pity, he sees that longing, he sees those memories of who she used to interact with. And it shows in her body language, the way she talks to him, and it broadens that rift, and that puts more pressure on him to not live up to that way that she's looking at him. And it makes it so difficult for him to even concentrate in those moments, which is kind of ironic considering that still that old version of her, because like he mentions, like, you look different. She does. She's styled her hair different. She's dressing different. Her whole air about her is very much so different. Time's passed. She's been out in the field. She's been doing all this other stuff. She's moved on. Until Mac pointed it out, I don't think she knew why things were different and why she was making things harder. She knew that her presence was making things harder for him, but I don't think she understood why, because you can't really own that or change that if you don't know it. So she thought it'd be best to just remove herself from the equation rather than try to evolve that relationship or help him. Because like he said, I needed you and you left. I didn't know where you went. You could have died. I don't know. Nobody told me anything. But then throughout, there's still these subtle moments where we can see that he's still conversing with the phantom version of her that he's built up in his head, where they still have that dynamic. She doesn't look at him any differently. She looks at him exactly like she used to. And that's kind of where things kind of, I don't know, are a little bit more smooth in the relationship. It's this idealized version of her that doesn't see him any differently. It's heartbreaking, man. It sucks because I understand where they're both coming from. Being in the situation that they've been in, I can't fault one or the other for really handling things the way they handled things. It's hard to go back to that knowing everything that's going on, especially considering what has been lost. I'm so glad that he's got somebody like Mac who's not holding that against him and is able to understand and help through his thought processes and kind of get out of him what he's trying to say, because he doesn't have this other version of him built up in his head that's kind of that's coloring his approach to building this relationship with him. Another thing that I really liked in this episode was showing how much Sky's gotten better at managing these conversations, getting these things, like when she came in, put on that show that Coulson's out, that's just them, but it was just a whole other play to make sure if they were going to in fact turn him over, that she could get literally the last bit, squeeze the last drivel of information out of him that they could possibly use, and she did it. She gave him everything he needed to see, to hear, to sell that all out, and then she just turned it off. But man, it was so stupid of them how they were transferring his ass, man. They should have cuffed him up. He should have been in a straitjacket. You don't put him in normal fucking handcuffs, not fucking just the county jail handcuffs. His arms need to be like straitjacketed all around. Hell, sledgehammer his elbows, break his kneecaps. He'll get better eventually. Saw his limbs off, drug him. Anything other than letting him just go the way they did. Strap him to a table. Like, what the fuck? He's Ward, dude. Why would you do that? And now he's out. I'm still not 100% convinced that that whole sequence at the end was just another red herring to sell the narrative his brother's selling. I still don't know. I'm still 50-50. And the only reason I'm giving Ward any leg is just because he's been very consistent about this narrative for a while, and the way he's built up his brother, it's not just now. It's not just now that he's entered the scene. He's talked about him in this way since they've met. That's the only thing that just makes me wonder that it's not completely a lie, that maybe his brother is just the manipulator just like him, but maybe even better, more twisted. I don't know. Another thing I wanted to touch on real quick is just the interesting development with this technology that they've kind of garnered from the obelisk. Like these new things, that these old discs, these shuriken that they've developed that they toss and it just hits their target, they disintegrate. Anytime we've seen this interaction before, they just turn to stone or whatever the hell material that is. They solidify. they petrify. Now we see them just wholly turning to dust. So whoever got hit with this shit, like, there is no undoing it. Like, I was holding out hope that maybe the people that have been afflicted with whatever this is prior, because like I said, like fucking her dad said, he could teach them how to survive this thing. Well, there's no surviving that, because if it's the petrification, then maybe that can be undone. I don't know how you undo that. So that's just another thing that came up, man. But a fantastic episode.
Yeah, basically every word of that.
Mm-hmm.
Right on the money. Love the Bobby and Hunter, Fitz, Simmons, the stuff with Ward, and then also just the central, Shield story going on here. Solid episode, honestly, and it really flew by. Honestly, I was like, "Oh wow, we're already at the end here."
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Comments. I liked what he was saying, especially the part with Talbot about like him shaking May's hand and everything. Like, he just keeps his sort of, I guess, respect or his trust mainly towards Shield. It just keeps growing and growing every episode, and it's great to see. Especially, it's cool to see, but it's also kind of like, dang, this leads to his downfall.
Yeah. Let's see here. Some of the responses. Ellen Steppenwolf for HitFix noted that the ever-changing situations of the characters in the second season, saying, "There's no complacency here the way there was last season. And now when the show is trying to be fun, it genuinely is." He specifically praised guest casting for the episode, calling it improved dramatically, and giving Palicki and Decay as examples of this. He also praised the interactions of Morse and Hunter, as well as the fight choreography and the photography, which he found much better than seen in season 1. Apart from the Morse, Hunter, and May storyline, Sepinwall also noted that the rest of the hour hummed along nicely. Caitlin Thomas of TV.com called The Fractured House a fun and well-balanced hour of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in a line of mostly very solid episodes. The Mockingbird/Hunter dynamic is electric, but also light enough to counteract the emotional anchors of Fitzsimmons, Ward, and Skye. She praised the guest cast for all being on point in terms of what they bring to the table. The ambiguity created between the Ward brothers and the development of Coulson into a stronger, more diligent, and more skillful leader. Oliver Sava of AV Club graded the episode a B, calling it solid and finding the season to be starting to settle into a nice groove, maintaining a strong forward momentum while delivering the intrigue, action, and humor fans expect from a Marvel Studios property. He highlighted Palicki, the Morse-Hunter relationship, and the improved fight choreography as well, and was positive of the moral ambiguity established for the Ward brothers, especially for Grant, of whom he said, "We don't know what his intentions are in the final moments of this episode, and that ambiguity makes him a much more captivating character than before." James Hunt of Den of Geek labeled the series now a reliably competent piece of television, praising the Morse, Hunter, Fitzsimmons, and Ward brother relationships, but being disappointed in the lack of follow-up from the ending of A Hand on the Wolf House, saying, "One would assume that would be top priority, even if they do get distracted from it. Instead, we saw nothing about it." Hunt also responded negatively to the sequence where two scenes are intercut as if occurred in the same time when they actually didn't. He called the technique a trick and cheap, and said it's never a very satisfying reveal because it makes the audience feel stupid. Misdirection is fine, but if everyone did it this way, it'd be impossible to follow the chronology of any televisual narrative. He was talking about the scene when they reveal that they already struck a deal with Ward. Okay. Joseph McCabe, writing for Nerdist, praised Palicki, her character, her interactions with Hunter, and the new Fitzsimmons relationship. Tension built on character, the kind of suspense TV was made for. Eric Goldman of IGN scored the episode an 8 out of 10, calling it great and highlighting the Ward brothers, especially saying the sequence where we cut back and forth between each brother swearing the other was a nefarious one was really strong, and we, as and Coulson, began to wonder if anything Ward had claimed in season 1 was true. Certainly, regardless of what Christian may or may not have done, Ward breaking free and killing the innocent men guarding him erases any chance of him being on the path of redemption right now, which I'm glad to see. Goldman was also positive about the development between Fitz, Simmons, and Mac, as well as the final action scene, but criticized some of the early banter as forced and trying too hard, and felt that Talbot's sympathetic side didn't feel earned. A lot of takes. David, any reaction to any of that?
Just that one part about intercutting something as if both as if they're in the
call it a cheap trick.
Yeah, don't agree with that. It's like this one wasn't sort of like, they tricked us. I didn't feel like I was being tricked in that moment. That like, they already struck the deal. It's like it's not really more so for us than just for Ward, and I don't see how it's we're supposed to feel tension whether or not Coulson made the deal. It's like, it's like, okay, yeah, I guess it's questionable whether or not he made the deal, but it's like at the same time though, it is kind of an obvious answer. Like, yeah, he probably would take the deal. So, and then this is, I mean, with any show or movie that does that, it could be great. I mean, the most notable one is Silence of the Lambs. That one part where you're seeing two people going into a house and you don't know like who's gonna end up where and all that, and then when the reveal happens, you're like, oh shoot, it's her! Like she figured it out. Oh man, like I don't know. I don't think anyone would feel dumb.
Yeah, pretty much. But I've really got nothing else to say. Great episode. This is to me one of those episodes where, man, it really shows off this wonderful cast of characters we've accumulated.
Mm-hmm.
And now we only have 4 episodes left until the end of this first half of season 2.
Mm-hmm.
What? That was fast.
Yeah.
That was like, this is just flying by now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it also is indicative of how much more settled the pacing is this season. We're just flying.
Yeah,
we're flying. And at the same time, it feels like we're not skipping past anything important. Like everything we're covering feels important and appropriate. It doesn't feel like we're being rushed. At the same time, we're just moving. We're not slowing down. And there's plenty of character work happening along the way that we're moving the plot forward. Look how much character was in this episode between Bobby and Hunter, especially. I mean, God, in this one episode, they're like, how are these two going to be together, like, and get along? And then, well, up at the end, you were like, okay, that's how. And you see Fitzsimmons and that thing going on, and the Ward situation. So, also we saw some development with, a peace offering finally with Talbot and Shield. Like, just a lot of character happened here.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And also while the plot was moving forward. So I think like I don't know. Shield, I think in many ways was one of the best shows to be able to balance both. Because I think a lot of people complain about like shows. Inevitably, when shows decide to just stop the plot and do nothing but character stuff, people complain about that, which is dumb because I think character is way more important than plot. Anyway, but again, I feel like the whole streaming model and specifically what Disney wanted to do on their streaming service, if there was ever a model for them to follow, they had no idea what they had with Whedon and Tancherowan.
Mm-hmm.
They had no idea. Again, you wanted to have a long string of successful Marvel television shows. Imagine if you had made them the head of the TV department.
Mm-hmm.
Then again, if you did, again, they'll still be competing with Kevin Feige. And I think you and I have deduced that he's just been the problem from day one.
Yeah.
So maybe it would have been a disaster.
Mm-hmm. I mean, who knows really how it would have worked out, but I think there would have been some tension for sure, and just I don't think we would have seen the full potential.
No, exactly. Soon as there's tension, bye. I'll just get somebody else who will agree with me, and then we'll just do what we do.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you all for listening and watching back home. Stay tuned, of course, next time for episode 7, which I believe is Writings on the Wall. Pretty big episode, that one. In many ways, that's the episode we've kind of been building towards ever since we've been asking, how did they bring Phil Coulson, or as Enoch would say, Philip J. Coulson, back from the dead? Well, let's find out next time. Thank you guys, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.